So everything has just become over optimized to the point whereby we've lost the essence of actually interacting with people. And because of that, then we've lost connection. And basically, as social beings, we are very much disconnected with people. And that's why we've seen, companies lay off people when they don't give a shit about them. I think, yes, podcast is a great way to build relationships, sell products as well. But I also think every medium is a great way to build relationships and sell products. Like, I don't necessarily think it's podcast specific. I think podcasts give us the highest level of connectivity, but at the same time, it is going to be down to the entrepreneur, to the product, to the service, to the market. It's so multifactorial, right? If you're able to help people on that spectrum and you're giving all that free content and it's been ingrained in your work and so on and so forth, now at this point, that free stuff, you'll get paid for implementation. As long as the product's good, as long as you're not an asshole, as long as you do it properly, people are going to be pretty happy about that, right? And they're going to be really happy to work with you effectively.
Hey guys, before we begin the podcast, I just have a super simple ask for you. If you'd hit the subscribe button or follow, whatever it is on your platform, it helps me more than you can know. So go ahead, hit the subscribe button, follow, and let's get right in. All right, Darren, you're the podcast agency guy. That being said, what makes podcasts unique and why should brand and influencers have them?
Good point. So basically, the way the internet has moved is that everyone and everything is just automated. Like we have AI girlfriends, AI chatbots. Everything is like a Zapier flow. Like everything is like ordered on your phone, and it's just super like unnatural, right? Everything's become so unnatural to the point that it's over optimized. Someone who is super optimized and what I do, I can look at this stuff and think it's just super overly optimized. Even like we don't meet people for coffee anymore because we can do it over Slack. We don't take Zoom calls because we can send Loom videos. So there's always this trade-off now in society, which is like efficiency, effectiveness, and productivity. Whereas what a podcast does is almost bring us back to the way like humans should communicate, which is face-to-face, ideally in person, sharing our values, sharing our personality, sharing our insights, and so on and so forth too. But this nuance has just been skipped in society now to the point where people don't even send like full length messages in text message. They just say like WBU instead of what about you, right? So everything has just become over optimized to the point whereby we've lost the essence of actually interacting with people. And because of that, then we've lost connection. And basically, as social beings, we are very much disconnected with people. And that's why we've seen, companies lay off people when they don't give a shit about them. We've seen relationships have massive detachment issues. People use like Tinder as disposable effectively because we've lost human touch effectively. And that's what we're trying to basically bring back with podcasts, whether someone is listening, washing their car, or bringing their kids for a walk, or in the gym. I think it's one of the few mediums that are left. I think it's the only medium that's left where people can actually express themselves properly and someone can come in and actually interact with them, understand their values, and also not necessarily have to get any in return, right? It's not about running some ad and getting someone to buy something. It's just about becoming a better person and being really able to connect with other people, which is lost, right? It's 100% lost right now in society.
Yeah, it's bringing back authenticity. I was throwing that on my LinkedIn for like 2 weeks straight and people were eating it up. Doesn't it seem disingenuous then as well as like putting it as in your funnel at all? Wouldn't it seem disingenuous?
To have it, not necessarily, because at the end of the day, people are looking at, if someone wants to work with someone, there's a technical ability, which is like, let's say, does Andrew know how to like produce websites? Does he know things about design? Does he know how to actually create websites? But then is this someone who we want to work with? Because at the end of the day, whether you're buying a product or a service or whatever you're doing, people do want to be able to basically pass that test. It's same when you're interviewing someone, right? If you're interviewing for a company, you have two interviews. You have a skills-based interview and you have a culture interview. And the culture is mainly, is this person like me or like them? So it's almost like we're able to create a new mechanism to be able to connect to people. Now, I would say that most people don't even get this right, though. They have the opportunity to add it as part of a funnel, to build a business around it, but most people gloss over it. And I think the reason why I'm so big on it is because in the early days of my show, I remember like the big agency guys, which bear in mind we've surpassed miles in this period of time, they were telling me personally that you would never make money from a podcast. And I thought it was kind of weird. It was just a weird thing it was a really weird thing to say. Be like, oh, you can make money elsewhere, but not through a podcast. And I just thought to myself, maybe this is a problem with the entrepreneur versus the vehicle. So the way I've spun from here is that I think yes, podcasts are a great way to build relationships, sell products as well. But I also think every medium is a great way to build relationships and sell products. Like I don't necessarily think it's podcast specific. I think podcasts give us the highest level of connectivity, but at the same time, it is going to be down to the entrepreneur, to the product, to the service, to the market. It's so multifactorial, right? But that's just a good way to think about it. But I do agree with you though that it has to be genuine and authentic, and the market can smell bullshit, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like, especially with a podcast, even the little things, like if you switch from one day to another, it's obvious like that. Like
Mm.
it shows. One thing that I want to bring up. So, do you know what BNI is? It's a networking. Okay, so BNI is like this really big networking group, and it stands for Business Network International, I believe. And there's a couple chapters in my area. And one of the things that they do is they have 1 minutes, which is like your pitch. That's where you kind of sell your business. But then you have one-to-ones, which is where you build the connection. Where I'm going with this is I'm saying one-to-ones are like the podcast. So you can get the referrals in it, right? But you're actually building the connection. You're not necessarily trying to sell exactly. You're trying to build the rapport. Whereas like your 1 minute speech, which is going to be like maybe your ad cuts or your newsletter, something like that, that's where you're actually trying to sell. And so you have the two, I guess you could say, dichotomies working together.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, right? Because the way I think about content in general is the fact that we're doing so much by putting out so much content that there has to come a point whereby you have to stop being a broke creator and start getting paid. And people might think that's disingenuous. However, think about it from this perspective, right? If you were spending every single week putting out this content that's long form, you're planning it, you're sending messages to people, you're creating content. Let's say something to do with podcasts. You're writing tweets, you're putting out 2-3 tweets a day, you're helping people with web development, you're putting out all these Instagram reels and everything. Well, you've given someone so much free value that at that point, the next step is an exchange of value for the next piece of value, right? It's like a natural ascension. If you went into a doctor's office, right, you wouldn't get seen by a doctor initially for free. They would say the doctor is $50 or $80, depending on what state you're in, and you would pay that in exchange to see the doctor. And then everything after the doctor, then let's say you need to get injections and all this kind of stuff, it adds up from there. But we would never think like anything of that. We would just think, okay, let's just pay whatever. Whereas in the online space, people think you can't do that and you have to keep giving more value. So a big thing that I work on with people is almost like breaking in that limiting belief that you can't offer something to someone. And you made an amazing point about that 1 minute, because the way I think about not necessarily like a mission statement, but what you do and how you help people can be elaborated over 60 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute, and 300 characters. And I just worked on a VSL for a client at the moment that was like 4 A4s long. And the way I presented to them was I said that this is everything. This is now how you solve problems. This is how you speak. This is how you show up. This is how you show up in your podcast and everything. Because if you're able to help people on that spectrum, and you're giving all that free content and it's been ingrained in your work and so on and so forth, now at this point, that free stuff, you'll get paid for implementation. And as long as the product's good, as long as you're not an asshole, as long as you do it properly, people are going to be pretty happy about that, right? And they're going to be really happy to work with you effectively.
It's also really nice because you build the proof. That's the really, really big thing. Social proof. So I was building one for one of my networking chapters and a website. And they were like, why would we throw the statistics on the website? Like, why would we show what we're doing? And I'm like, it's social proof. People look at that and go, you know what you're doing. That's the really nice thing about the podcast as well, is you can show that you know what you're talking about, what you're doing, just by talking to people.
That's interesting, man, because it's about how you pull from the stories, right? And it's the same if you were, I always talk about like sharing experiences, not advice. And Tim Stoddard really broke this into me before, which would be a great guy for your podcast, which is like, sharing advice is cheap. If I tell you that, you should stop smoking, you should stop drinking, and you should clean up your act, yeah, that's probably what your parents tell you and whatever, and then you end up not doing it, not listening to them. But if I share my experiences, being like, hey, I used to party all the time, and I'll tell you that it sucks after a while, and basically you run out of enjoyment from it, and you should do something else with your life, you'll think, okay, this guy has been through it. He's given me his experiences. Maybe I don't want to listen to it now. And that's the beauty of a podcast, effectively. And that's why I think sometimes it can be taken out of context because people are thinking that they're shilling advice, right? And I think the relationship kind of manosphere space is wild for this, right? Because they're all about advice, whereas sometimes they don't back up what they're saying. Same with financial advice, right? We can go through the whole pyramid. We have broke financial advisors advising you how to manage your money. We have relationship coaches that are not even a relationship, and we have health experts who are fat, right? So it's always important to validate the source and then to look at it from that perspective of, are they sharing advice or are they just pulling out their experiences? So I think that's the best way to learn from it, and people love it, right? We've spoken about this previously too, is that like people get drawn into the story, and you can be fat, you can be broke, you can have divorces, but there's no problem with that as long as you're actually helping people. So Michael Robert Glover, who was on your show, he was on my show, he's been divorced twice and he's on his third marriage, yet when he speaks about marriage advice, I listen, because the dude has a lot of scars from the battlefield that he can share as wisdom. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think if anything, you would learn more from a person like that who's had two quote unquote failed marriages than someone who's been in a marriage all the time, or that's not been in a marriage, obviously. Anyway, I digress, but you get the idea with the point, right?
Yeah, I was poking him about that too. Because I was like, what's going to make this marriage different than the other two? And he basically said the same thing of what, like, I mean, I've learned from the other two. So that's what's going to make this third one different. And I mean, if it works, it works. That's what matters.
That's super interesting. If you don't mind just going deeper on that, because most people never learn about their mistakes, right? Most people repeat the same 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, and they never ever make a difference, right? And the reason being is because they're looking at external factors for an internal problem. So if I go through like all the businesses when I was younger, it was like fail, 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 lost money, lost money, lost money, lost money. And then at some point I was like, okay, the problem is me. It's not the funnel. It's not the business model. The problem is me. I need to go figure out my thing. And then even with our current business, so much things I got wrong. And then when we went to build a new offer, there was so much things I got right because I got so much things wrong and I had learned from them, and I'd learned from them specifically. And it's good to be able to point that out. And we had our company all hands last weekend, and we sat down and we literally talked to each other, being like, it's so much easier to build when you've fucked it up for a decade. It's just so much easier. It's like, okay, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Same with a relationship, same with your money, right? That's why, people with their first job, they spend it all and so on and so forth to go out and partying and stuff, because the wisdom comes from the pain. And I think a lot of times I would look back on my early 20s and be like, oh, like, what if I did this and what if I did that? But I actually don't look back at any of it with regret, because I feel like that everything compounds, providing you actually learn. And I think that's a big caveat, dude. I'm a little bit older than you. Well, I'm a good bit older than you. And like, if I look back on people that are my age now, a lot of them have not learned their lesson, man. They're not learning their lessons. They're out doing all sorts, and it's just a tough position to be in, because I also see people in their 50s not learning their lessons, 60s not learning their lessons, right? So not everyone is, what age? You're 21, right? 21? 19, dude. Whoa, bro, that is crazy. Man, well done. Fucking hell. That is absolutely wild, man. Like, to think about your career trajectory, man. If I was to invest in a stock, it'd be fucking the Andrew stock. Because like for where you're about to go and like the exposure that you have is is amazing, man. Is amazing. And how many episodes are you releasing a month, roughly? Dude, if you I have that problem too. Don't worry. But if you're doing one a week for the next decade, like, you're just gonna be so fucking wise at the end of it. And the reason being is because you're also battling it with action, right? And that's why I was a bit of a, I could say that I was a hypocrite myself in the beginning of my podcast, because I worked in a tech startup. I was making 100K a year, whatever. It was fine. But at the same time, I was kind of a hypocrite because I would hear all this great advice and not really do anything. Now I was doing small things, but nothing really substantial. Whereas for you, like you're building the business and you're learning, right? And sometimes when the days seem dark, I think that's when you learn most from the podcast and you can bring it into the business. Some days you're like, why the fuck am I even doing this, right? That's important, I think, in the podcast journey, because at all those points, everybody breaks, right? It's like in the amount of people that I've encountered that have all given up in the journey. So it's like being able to have that skill at 19 is probably the best skill to have, man.
I think one of the hardest parts is especially being like, do you know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is?
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's like where you have like uninformed. Oh no, I kind of is it uninformed optimism, and then it goes down to the peak of
Yeah,
despair.
essentially.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Essentially.
yes.
So,
Well, go ahead.
like, especially being so new, like my biggest problem is I'll have a new skill and I'm like, I got this, I got this. And then I'm like, fuck, the day after. And it's so hard to not have that, like, that ego before. And I would say one of the biggest books for me that really helped it was Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. It's like really small book, 200 pages, and it really hammered it in. And it's something that I have to check myself a lot because I know I have that uninformed optimism. And I just have to be like, don't do that. Don't. Just figure it out, get going. Don't. And it's definitely a problem when it comes to business. But I will say, every time I take a step off, I go, like, because I expected to be so bad, I go, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. And so it gives another step of optimism and then it launches up. So the one thing that I really suck at in terms of business is sales. Like I'm really good at building that relationship, but getting someone from building that relationship to selling is really hard for me. Like in the past week, I've screwed up 20 grand worth of deals and it's tough.
True, true. However, it's important to look at those and try diagnose them, right? And I think even for myself, that's something that is interesting about like business, because business is very fluid. It's a fact that there's no direction, there's no goalpost to some degree, there's no rule book. So if you can get people on a call, for instance, that may look like that is the first win, right? That's the first success. If you can build a relationship, that's a success. If you can have a conversation with someone, that's a success. And maybe they don't send you the transfer, but it's always about those miniature wins. And there's a great book called Gap Selling by Keenan. It's an amazing book. He's a great guy. He was on my podcast. And basically the concept behind it is like you want to get that 10, 20 miniature yeses before getting them over the line, basically. So it only comes from a lot of experience as well. And at the point whereby you're at your brink, whereby you think like, okay, I actually can't get better in this because like I need to do something different, that's when you would invest in someone. Right. And I've even been going through a program right now on sales specifically, on webinars, on VSLs, on ads, would you believe? That we're even opening up the idea. I'm opening up the idea to it because what I'm trying to do in this kind of season of my life is like not have attachment to stuff, right? For some reason, the internet is divided between guys that like do content and don't do content, run ads, don't run ads, do sales calls, don't do sales calls. It's as if like it's like a political party. And all I want to do is just build a fucking great business. Like that's all I care about. If it means running ads, if it means taking sales calls, if it means me sitting in a mastermind to try to learn more, and so be it. Like whatever it takes, I'm going to do what's required of me effectively. So just tying it back to your example is that yes, you may feel like you suck at sales right now, but that's really good, right? Record your calls. Do take the steps to get better. And I think that's what's important is the fact that most guys will stop at that point and think, okay, I'm gonna shit. Whereas like if you imagine like a circle and if you start in the middle and if like mastery is on the outside of the circle, every time you come back, you get worse. Right, you get worse and you have to restart and go again. Whereas like that's a beautiful part of like, the infinite game is the fact that these skills will compound. So like you have a service business right now, you may want to build something that's product based in the future. I guarantee you all the lessons that are in your brain that you don't even realize are going to be the top lessons that you bring in terms of how you write, create new copy, create new websites, get people to the landing page, sell the product, distribute the product, all of those mechanisms that you're learning right now. And I would actually almost say that service businesses are actually the most complex operationally. So all the other businesses are just super simple as a result, right? Apart from software. But genuinely, to some degree, right? Like as operations scale in a service business, it is absolutely mental. And like our business is literally like a fucking firehouse 24/7. But yeah, man, I think that's the beauty of it, right? It's just taking the pressure off you yourself a small bit because you have time. You know, I have time. I would argue the person that's 56 also has time, but that's my own opinion.
Hey, mate, are you at all struggling with your website? Whether it be conversions, being found, or just in general getting people to do anything on your website aside from look at the homepage? Well, I'll tell you what, I have an offer for you. I personally book one-to-one meetings with people so that we can help them get their website from F tier to A tier. If that sounds like something that you'd be interested in at all, go down below, check out the link in the description. There's going to be a Calendly link and a link to my website. Both of those can get you there. So go ahead, book a one-to-one personalized meeting with me, and looking forward to talking. With that, back to the podcast. You have time until rent comes. That's the big kicker. That's the big kicker. I know one of the things that I'm definitely struggling with in my business as well is contractors. I know you have Fuchs, I think is how you pronounce it. I know you have him because you were talking about how he's doing a lot of operations, if that's correct. Am I correct with that? Yeah. What's your role specifically? How would you define your role in the business?
So mine is mainly CEO, so it's hiring and sales. So the two most important positions for a CEO is to always be selling and always be hiring. So you always want to be bringing in the best talent into the company. You always want to be doing interviews. You always want to be pulling in people and putting them on your basically like your line of sight for hiring in the future. You want to making sure that the culture is strong, people are happy, they're progressing. You're putting them in their best seat. And for me, there's a great book called Traction, and they speak about having the people that get it, they want it, and they also have the capacity for it. So just because someone is talented doesn't mean that they actually want it. Just because someone wants it doesn't mean that they're talented, right? So for me, it's super important that we get the best people in there, which can be a combination of freelancers, full-time people. We have a ton of full-time people. We have a ton of freelancers too when we want to, when we need to. We also have agencies that we work with, but we need to make sure that they're aligned to the vision. And our vision is just super simple. We're building the largest media company in the podcast space. We want to run the entire industry when it comes to helping people grow and monetize their podcast. Very simple. Different ways to get to that goal, but that's been our vision. So when someone comes into our ecosystem, first thing is that they probably meet someone like Piyush. They'll do a screening interview, which is highly like technical, making sure that basically they can actually do their job. And then the next stage would be like myself, which is much more culture based. And like for us, we're on 24/7. Like our two values are rootlessness and relentlessness, right? Because we work 7 days a week. We're making sure we're moving forward. That we've never missed a deadline, right? We're going to get it done effectively. And I think that's super important from a CEO's perspective, is making sure you have the right people in the right seat. But then on the front end of the business, then more of the showman side of the business, as I like to describe it, it's about getting people through the door, right? So making sure the brand is super intact, the integrity is really strong, like people buy into the vision externally, which is your network, your customers, and so on and so forth. So that's really strong, and then getting people through the door, right? So for me, the front end of the business is LinkedIn, writing, the podcast specifically, YouTube, a bit of Instagram, but not really because it's not really for ICP. It kind of is a small bit, but not really at the same time. So it's mainly like building that kind of brand, the front end of it. So the way I would describe it is like most of my day is still on sales, like optimizing sales, optimizing like basically your funnel and the process on the sales side. It's also marketing, so marketing what we're doing, and also growing the business. So whether that's getting the most out of what we have right now, because sometimes I think you don't need more clients, you need better clients, right? So we really really focus on having like excellent clients, because I think if you can eliminate the idea of like a bad fit of a client, well, that will save you a ton of heartache, which is culture. And then two, it will save you a ton of revenue, because with your best clients, you can make an extortion amount of money, right? With them, you can help them make crazy amounts of money, and you can build with them. I think pretty much all of our best clients, we're actually building with them. So we're building products with them, we're selling them sponsorships, we're building services with them, and they're perfectly happy, right? That's kind of the way we're trying to screen it. Now you don't know who's a bad actor and who's potentially a dud. Some people might turn out to not be as good as whatever. So That's really the role of a CEO, is making sure that that culture is being instilled across a team. People are aligned, because I think at the end of the day, like when shit gets rough, if they're not aligned to the vision, they're not going to stick around, right? And like our I think our retention is 100%. I think we've only let go of one editor in the past couple of years, so people really buy into the vision, right? And that's the beauty of it, and that's also why I prefer to have a team as well. Just for a bit of context, there's like a big trend in like solopreneurship and having a small team and doing it. Sorry, having no one and doing it yourself. I did that for a long time. Like even when I was not producing, when I was just consulting, I would have like 15 clients and I was like running in like all different directions and it was a mess. Like I actually don't think that's a great idea sometimes. It obviously depends on the business. Like if you're someone like Dan Co and you're selling like just info products, and you're not worried about operations, that's fine, whatever. But I think if you really wanted to make something like really great, like really, really great, you do need great people to do it. So, as you mentioned, Piyush, he comes from Goldman Sachs, right? He's like super high pedigree from Goldman Sachs. He was on the trading floor in Goldman Sachs. Tom was a teacher, bear in mind, so we couldn't have a better coach. And then a lot of our producers have worked with very large creators, like people like Jack Hopkins and so on. They've worked with a lot of these bigger guys before, and then they wanted full time roles, and then they've come in house and to be more full time versus freelance. So, yeah, man, you know what I mean. I think that's the beauty of, because you're quite literally building, right? That's where the word comes from, building. So you want to build a good culture, people feel engaged, and they actually enjoy what they're doing as well.
One of the things that's really difficult with that is finding people. That's 100% the hardest because, like, so there's an agency, essentially like a student agency, because I'm right by a college campus. And the biggest problem there isn't necessarily the quality of work that come out of the students because they're trained,
Mm.
it's the work ethic.
100%, dude. Dude,
And
100%.
I had to let go of a contractor because they just stopped showing up to meetings and didn't tell me. So, like, I was having them go to networking meetings for me. And for 2 weeks, there was just no one there because I wasn't informed. I wasn't told. I was like, where the hell are you?
There's two sides there. So one, obviously the responsibility is on a CEO to make sure that like the check-ins are done on like a daily basis or every second day or whatever. But then the other opportunity too is like the screening of the people that are coming in. So I think like a lot of times when people come from like, Ireland, UK, like they come in with this entitled opinion that they can basically like run the show and they're like better than the CEO, they know exactly what's happening, whatever. No, they don't, right? I think at the end of the day, like the CEO knows the most about the business, and then they'll hire experts. Well, at a point that we're at, you would hire experts, but most businesses are not at that point. If you're small, you're hiring people that will do a role. So every soul has a role. So you basically want people that are hungry. So someone said to me recently that like your business, well, my business specifically is a reflection of me. And what I mean by that is like the clients that we attract are kind of people that are like older, a bit more like advanced, not really like gimmicky and fucking TikTok style. And the same with the people that apply. So I've noticed that people, when I put up something on my Instagram, people that apply are generally not like 16-year-old kids on TikTok. It's usually guys that worked in like a graphic design shop, a chop shop for like 7 years as like an animator or a designer, and then now they're looking to like leave their 9 to 5 and work remotely or whatever. So I think that's really, really important. So even for you, as you're building the podcast and as it gets bigger, I can kind of see your values already through the content you're producing. And then people are like, oh, like, I like that guy, Andrew. Like, I like what he's about. Like, I'm going to actually stick with this content. And then I'm actually going to eventually apply. So it's interesting, man. And I also would consider looking outside the US, because especially for you, because of the time advantage, if you're based in the US, it could be a good idea to get people that are based even in Asia, man. I have a lot of great workers that are working in Asia because they're going to be 12 hours ahead. So if you assign them tasks, let's say it was like design this or do that, whatever, you could wake up, a lot of it would be done, providing that obviously the guidance is good. But I think that's the beauty of it too, right? So I would consider a distributed team too.
That's something that I'm starting to do, especially with like the podcast editing. So I have one person who does my reels, who I know we were talking about. And then I have one person who's now doing like my podcast editing and doing the intros and like the trailers, whatever. And so one thing that's really nice is they're both, I think one's in Pakistan. I don't forget where the other one's from, but they're not in the US. And so, yeah, like I wake up basically every morning, I'll send them tasks. I wake up with it done. And the other nice thing that I've found is if you find the right people, they're willing to work with you. So one of my contractors, she was like, I'm newer, right? I don't know what I'm necessarily doing. Like you're one of my first guests for this, or not first guests, but first clients for this. So I'm like, perfect. Here's what we'll do. I'll pay you hourly and we're going to dial every little bit in. And then we go from there. So that's what I'm doing because I'm in your coaching program. So I have access to those videos. So what I'm doing is I'm sending her the long form videos on how to do it. And then we're dialing the little things each episode. And we're doing one thing to make it better and better and better. It's like the 1% every day.
100%, man. I think that's the biggest thing that people try to jump in. They try to go from zero to hero. Whereas unless you are experienced in editing or motion graphics or animation, you can't just go from nothing to everything, right? And that's the beauty of having a very solid team with a good so I can tell from your personality that you're not going to be super pushy on these people. You want to build for the long term. You don't want to hire just a bunch of random people that are going to come and go. You ideally want to find a good editor that will stay with you and stick with you. Exact same for me. And I think in this kind of online business chop shop era, people are they don't have the attachment again, or they're not willing to sit with something. They're not willing to actually learn and help someone develop. Whereas a lot of our best team members have like picked something up that was new and then really gone with it and just learned step by step over time, not having too much of a commitment to this as well. Because I think the biggest thing is that guys expect everything. They basically want them to over deliver and under promise effectively, which is not going to be the reality, right? Especially as you're building up. So it's something you need to experiment with. But if you get it right and you're working on it, you'll build much more of a better business. It's just going to allow you to sleep at night, not be too worried, not be overworked. Because the problem is that most guys will hire poor people and then not be able to actually do the work because they just don't have the skill, right? They just don't have the skill. If you didn't have a background in UX, U design, how else are you going to do it, right?
That's also one of those other things of background, right? Because this is a really hot topic in the US. College or not college. I'm going to make a couple points here. College is fucking expensive. It's 16 grand right now a semester. A semester.
Dude.
Which means $32,000 a year. I can live off of 2/3 of that.
Dude. But bro, I think some of the other universities are probably more expensive as well, right? Like Duke, all those universities.
Yeah.
Like how much would that be roughly? Would they be like 60K a year?
I have no idea, man. I'm not even gonna ask questions. That's too pricey. I didn't go to Purdue in Illinois, which is essentially just south of me, because it was too expensive and it was a bigger school. Like I got accepted and everything, but it was so expensive. Here's where I'm going with this. Background is important, yes, but training is more important than background. So here's what I mean by this. You don't need the background if you know what you're doing. So like take a course, take something else, because when people hear background, they typically expect some sort of certificate, something like that. But you don't necessarily need that. Like I don't have a UI UX design certificate. I don't have formal training in it, but I hired people to teach me how to do it. And then I used my work that I had as proof that I knew what to do. So like it's the social proof. How are you going to socially prove it? But you don't necessarily need the background.
Dude, 100%. But that's why you hire for attitude, right? You train for skills, hire for attitude, because you don't actually need people that are like super experienced. Otherwise, like, what are you going to do? Hire for MBA program? It's going to be like all over the place. However, what you do want is someone who's just hungry, right? Young, hungry, they're driven, and they're going to go and fill in the gap specifically. And that's why I think even university, it's a fucking scam in America, man. Like, it's bad enough in Ireland. Mine was 4K a year. So I had to take out a loan for it, racked up like 20K over the course of like 4 years. That's obviously a fraction of what it is in America. But I think even at that, it's still a fucking scam, right? Because you have like liberal arts degrees and people come out as like poets, right? They're just not going to utilize the degree. Whereas in America, like they're putting you in a corner for you. We can go down this path, man. I can talk about this all day. They're putting you in a corner so that you have to go and take the safe job, because if you go take the job in Goldman Sachs or some shitty fucking bank, well, then at least you're getting 80K or 60K a year. And then in 30 years' time, you can pay back the loan. Whereas if you don't, when you take the path that traveled, if you build a business, well, at that point, well, then you may default on it. So there's all these psychological cues, which I genuinely think that's how like America's built, is that they ingrain people so that they're not like you, 19 in your fucking basement, building out like a business and having independent thought. Because again, if you don't have a plan, they'll assign you a plan, right? And the path that you're assigned is plowing in that student debt. And I think it's just ironic how in America you can't get a business loan at your age, but you can get a student loan of like 100K or 200K. So that kind of just says it all, right? It just says it all, just the way things are positioned. And then it just comes down to independent thought, right? I think if you're moving from what you want to do, like what is it you want to do? Like how does your perfect day look? Like what does that look? How is it designed? And then having an independent thought to think, okay, I'm doing a service business right now, designing websites. Do I want to do that forever? Maybe. I want to keep developing a skill. Maybe I can build it. Maybe I can sell it. But I think most people are not thinking clearly, and especially the age you're at. Even when I was your age, man, I was just partying, drinking. Was like, okay, let's go to university. It's a thing to do. What will I do? Okay, this degree over here looks kind of good. Let me just sit in the back of the class and plan my next party. And I kind of did that for so long, looking at it now, thinking that that was obviously not a good call, and I didn't need to do it. And that's just the irony, is that unless your heart is set on being like a neurosurgeon or a doctor, you just don't need to do it. And I would argue that all the other degrees people are being trained to like versus actually like. They're just being conditioned into enjoying.
Another thing that's really interesting about college is it's the opportunity cost. So my dean of students is really, I talked to him about college, and he said, especially with increased costs in college and the 4-year opportunity costs, unless you're going for something like you said, like you want to be a doctor, you want to be like data science, that's one where you probably need a college degree. Something like maybe
Statistics.
mathematics, something really heavy. Yep. Don't go to college.
But if you think
That
about
was
it
my
though,
dean of students.
yeah,
And so he
opportunity
has an
cost is huge,
incentive.
right? And yeah, and that's coming from the source, right? That guy's coming from the very,
Yeah.
very top up. And it's not like, this is what's interesting, is that I know we're kind of in this space of like, oh yeah, build that business, do this, take control of your life, all that kind of shit. But you can also just travel during that period of time. Like I'm based in Asia. I see so many people come through and travel through that are young, and at the same point, so much people that are old. They're like late in their 20s, early 30s, and they think, okay, I've just wasted 10 years in corporate America. I've realized that it's an absolute fucking scam. Now I'm defaulting on my loans. I don't want to work in the banks anymore. I'm actually here to decrease my expenses overall. So it's just a very interesting debate to see how like you could basically waste half a decade effectively, and no one's going to raise an eyebrow. That's what's interesting, right? It's the fact that no one raised an eyebrow for wasting half a decade, but they'll raise an eyebrow if you wanted to build a business or adjust your offer or do something different. So it goes back to the filtering system. But I also think though that things are changing so quickly. Like the fact that in 2020, like this online business space was not there. In 2022, it was not the way that it is now. In 2026, it's going to be completely different. And I think it's going to be very interesting to observe how that's going to adjust. So why are you taking information from a university that basically built the curriculum like 40 years ago, and they're making small changes at this point, whatever? It's just that they're super, super outdated. And it's big company versus startup, right? The startup can move, can be agile, can adjust to the market, can take feedback. Whereas the big company, they don't really have much options. They're doing the same shit over and over again. They're heavily regulated. They have Jenny from accounting, who basically has been sitting here for 40 years straight, and she's not changing in her mind. So you're not changing too, right? And again, coming from someone who's done that, who's been in the investment banks, who's been in management consulting, who's bought the ticket, I can just tell you that that's a life of mediocrity. That is a very miserable existence, because I did it, not because I'm judging on it and because I'm like 21 on Twitter. It's because I did it. I looked at those careers. I was in those careers. I looked at the people. They were fat, bald, overweight, and just hated their existence. And if I looked at it specifically, being like, this is where I'm going to end up if I'm a good boy and wear my shirt, put on a blazer, wear funky jeans on Thursday and Friday, and go for thirsty Thursdays. I just knew where my life was going to end up. And I don't think much people are willing to put their head out of the sand, because it hurts, dude. Like building a business sucks. It is rough. I'm anxious all the time. I'm always checking my phone. I was just at a dinner and I was literally on the phone to like four different fucking SMEs for four different really important things, trying to book calls with them, not even do with sales, just my own problems. And I was at a dinner during it. It was a 2 hour long dinner, and I was like, oh my god, that was such a fucking waste. And these things will happen. And that was after 5 o'clock, and now it's 8, and I have calls till 12, and that's just a reality. So it's like, what I like to say is like, that you may have come across Daniel Priestley. He says like rough roads end smooth, smooth roads end rough. So I've seen those people take the easy path, and it's a tough end of the lifetime, man. No money, no retirement, small bit of cash, fat, lazy, broke. And then I've seen the other side, whereas you go through the decade of pain and you've built something super substantial and it's impactful, and you may or may not be wealthy at the end of it, but I think you're living much more in alignment. And humans are designed to build, right? We're designed to create, we're designed to iterate, we're designed to like look at things and solve problems. Literally going all the way back to the stone ages, we would literally look at a rock and utilize how could we use this as a weapon or a tool, or use it as shelter. We looked at things and we solved things and we problem solved and we built cool shit. Sitting in an office, in a fucking cubicle, being told what to do and being told when you can go take a piss is not the creator. It's not the builder. It's not what we're designed to do.
Yeah. The problem is people need a kick in the ass. And I know for me, I had a really fucking big kick in my ass junior, senior year of high school. So here's how my high school played out. COVID hits freshman year. So halfway through freshman year, everyone's fully online. Nothing you can do. 2 to 3 weeks after COVID hits, my mom gets diagnosed with terminal cancer. So this will explain a lot. It'll make a lot of sense. So my mom spent most of her time going to college. She went all the way through. She got her doctorate. She taught in the college. She loved it. She essentially worked. She almost got her tenure at the local private university. She loved to be a teacher. She just wanted to study. But then she wasn't making enough to support just me and her because my parents got divorced when I was really young. So what happens here is she jumps to the tech university, goes, they're learning more applicable skills here than the university. So she likes the tech school. She's making more. She can support us too. So now, life's starting to pick up. Things are going good. Back to high school. High school goes, mom's diagnosed. Year goes by, it's COVID, everyone's fucking suffering, normal shit. Year and a half comes in, she's starting to like really get hit with stuff, right? The chemo's really hitting her, stuff's not going good. And that Christmas was what really hit it for me. So she's going, Christmas, couple days before, she goes in immediately because she is an infection. And one of these times, these infections are going to kill her. And we're not allowed to see her because it's COVID. And I'm like, fuck, why the hell am I going to school or anything like this when I can't see my mom, right? I can't do any of this. So that really made me rethink kind of what the fuck is going on. And I'm starting to question things. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Things keep going, progressing. Junior year hits. I'm trying to figure it out, right? What's going on? And at this point, I'm running a YouTube channel for CSGO skins. I didn't make a whole lot of money. I made about $1,000 overall on that. But I'm starting to kind of figure things out, going through kind of my entrepreneur type shit. And then what really got me a kick in the ass to really get in the game was my mom questioning. She always had a thing like college is worth it, but she was questioning whether or not 4-year or 2-year. And then I go, does that make sense? And she's on her deathbed just sitting there regretting so many things of her life and talking about it. And I'm not going to say like what exactly and all that stuff, but really listening to my mother reflect back and go, fuck, was that worth it? Makes me question every goddamn thing I do. And it's another layer of anxiety of like, with this entrepreneurship, like this is genuinely something I enjoy. And it also gives me that really heavy dark past that I can push and just keep going and go and go and go and go and go and go. And I essentially have this unlimited motivation. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily need a kick in the ass like that, but They need a kick in the ass to get like going, if you know what I'm saying.
Fuck, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's fucking crazy, man. Holy shit. But I guess like now, like you've been able to learn from it, right? You've been able to take a step back and see like, is that what I really wanted to do? And even is this what I really wanted to do? And I think only in those moments like where it's so difficult that you can basically utilize this for everything that you're doing, right? And now I think it's good to have that kind of building from pain angle, but then you get to a point whereby you actually do enjoy this, right? And you're helping people and you're solving problems and so on and so forth. And I think this is where that's where a lot of people get it wrong. 'Cause it's fucking perspective, dude, right? At the end of the day, like if you're able to make money on your laptop or even if you do have a job, like okay, like it is having that perspective that there is a bigger play, whereas you could step outside and get hit by a bus tomorrow, and then it all comes to a crashing end. And I think especially in your 20s, like they're called the invincible years for a reason because people think you don't that you're going to stay out that forever. But that's a very tough event to go through, especially being so young. But now you're at the point though whereby you can build from it, right?
Right. And I mean, always look at it this way. Every negative thing, there's always an equal and opposite reaction, is kind of how I look at it.
Always.
So if you have something that's so fucking awful, you're going to get something out of it on the other end. You're going to learn something. You're going to be able to
Mm,
do something. So no matter how bad it is, always try to look at the bright side. Is kind of my
mm.
philosophy on that.
Of
I
course, man.
know what's like, where was I going to go with this? I was going to circle back to something, but I don't remember what it was.
No, no,
Completely
you're
got
cool.
sidetracked.
You're cool, man. But that's a really good perspective to have, though. Like for the way that you're structured, like with your business, with your podcast, with your perspective, with who you're interviewing, that's a really strong position to be in. And I think as well, I don't necessarily feel like you can't allow not negative emotion. There's no emotion is necessarily positive or negative, right? But it's almost like allowing yourself to process what's happening as well at the same time and be like, okay, I've got this far so far. I'm building on this. It's good to stop again, reflect, have a bit of perspective on it, and then looking at it from that perspective, like where do I want to go next? Because again, you don't need to have a super huge business to be successful, right? And what even is success? Success is basically like we are the only animal that has a metric around success or failure. No one walks around the animal kingdom saying like that guy's a success, that guy's a failure. They just get on with it, right? They they hunt, they go after what they need to go after, and I think it's allowing yourself to kind of have that perspective too, and not following other people's plans. And I know you're not doing that, but that's a good way to kind of view how you should structure the next couple of months and years, really.
Yeah. I know evidently goal here is work as much as possible on the business, figure it out, because if anything else, you fuck up the business, it tanks. What did you learn? There's no better lesson. Like, fail, try again. Fail, try again. All right. On that, with failing, what in your business right now are you struggling with?
Such a fucking good question. Right now, where do I start, bro? So I think everything, at the end of the day, you can look at things and think like, okay, they have to get better, right? They have to improve and have to get better. I think for me, the biggest thing from going from like six figures to seven figures was almost like like allowing myself to let go a small bit, hiring the right people, putting the right people in the right seats. Going from seven figures to eight figures is a whole different ball game, bro, because it's more about leverage, right? It's building something that has leverage. So for me, it's almost like is building the infrastructure to be able to scale. That's the biggest thing. So whether that's sales infrastructure, having like enough salespeople on the back end, or getting that dialed in, I think that will be the biggest area that I'm struggling with right now. Or two, like operationally, being able to allow for scale. So I think scale is a funny thing because especially for what we do, people think like, oh yeah, like if I just sold more stuff, things would work out. But that's actually not the case. If you sell more stuff, you have more shit to do, right? And because of that, if you weak systems in the back end, it's like a house of cards. So it's almost like you build the infrastructure in the back end. So in the beginning, you sell before you build 100%, and you just get people in the door. But then there comes a point where you have to consolidate, and then you're in growth phase. And when you're in growth phase, it's like you're growing the business. So you're making sure that things are dialed in, people are in the right place, the systems are being built, and so on and so forth. And then you scale from that point. So the past couple of months for me was like looking at the inefficiencies we had in the business, and it was a ton of them. Spending a lot of time hiring, like a lot of time, like on like literally just sitting down with people and just taking calls every fucking 20 minutes, and then allowing the ability to scale. So now where we're at now is that across the incubator, which I think is a nice name, which I changed yesterday, and across the actual the media company on the front end side, it's just about growing it and growing it from there because we have the infrastructure in place now. And that's, I think, the greatest area or the scariest area to be in business is actually between 1 and 3 million a year, because you're not making enough money to hire like a leadership team and to hire more people to replace you to run the organization specifically. But at the same time, you're at a position whereby if you don't move forward, you're going to actually move backwards, because you can't just like stop, right? Nothing stays in motion, moves forward or backwards. I think that was the position that I'm in right now, whereby it's like very gray, because it's like, yes, we have a sales process and it works. Sometimes it works and doesn't work, and so on and so forth. So you need to be able to look at how does like a 10 million a year business operate, and then reverse engineer how that would work. And it's almost making 10 million a year decisions within your business. So, do I compromise our values for a specific client? Do I do this? Do I do that? Well, you wouldn't be doing that at a higher scale. So it's like, why do you do it at a smaller scale? So that's where I'm kind of at right now. I think from like a revenue perspective, I always get caught at like thresholds. And I think what gets you to the next level is not, it's almost a person you have to be to get to the next level. Like you almost have to be worthy of making like 400K a month or 200K a month or 300K a month to be able to do it. It doesn't just like fucking happen. You have to take the risk for it. So what I've been doing a lot in this phase of our life is building the systems, investing a lot more in education for myself, like my own personal education of what we need to basically do, and then just getting people in the right seat to do it. That's the biggest thing, man.
Yeah. It's the other issue is not building too fast, because that was what you saw Zuckerberg, Facebook start grow really really fast. Mark Zuckerberg went into this depression because Facebook is just a house of cards, like you said, and then you have all the privacy issues, you have all that, and now we're finally seeing a glow up because he's getting his shit together, right?
Yeah, he's shredded.
So
He has like a necklace and everything these days. But I think it's funny, right? Because so what's funny is you have to undo the problems before you can move forward, right? And I've noticed this. I've noticed this with a bunch of things that we did wrong. We did a bunch of things wrong, and now I'm actually noticing it, whereby it's like, okay, if I was to bring in 100 customers tomorrow, what would happen? I always think about this stuff. What would actually happen? How would we do it? And it's funny because you have to be able to fucking do it for you to be able to make more money, right? For you to build that process. So it's almost like building that ecosystem, which is super tough to do, number one. And for instance, like Mark Zuckerberg in the privacy issues, he had to undo everything he did to change everything on the front end again to be able to redo it. And that's something that a lot of people are not willing to admit, which is why Facebook went 15 years without changing their privacy laws or whatever it is. So there needs to be a tipping point. And I've worked in these startups, man. I worked at very small scale startups up until like, so anywhere between 7 employees up to 1,500, 8,000 employees as well as they've scaled. And sometimes like scale is almost disgusting to look at, right? Because it's so difficult on the business. It's so difficult on hiring. This is why Silicon Valley companies start, they blow up, they glow up and then blow up basically in the process. And just learning from that, right? Obviously, we have a different business model. We're not going to fucking get to $1 billion tomorrow. And also, that's not the approach doing it. But again, it's the same mechanisms. I think a lot of guys who do build those Facebook-esque businesses, they end up in tears because they've never actually knew how to build a business. They just raise a bunch of money and then hire like a chief of staff, and then they hire a bunch of people, and that's the end of it. And then they just run out of cash, and then they're a founder, they're a 1x founder on LinkedIn. So these guys don't really know how to build a business, like i.e. sales, marketing, fulfillment. Whereas what we're doing, it's actually much more in the trenches. So you could go build a SaaS company tomorrow, no problem, because you understand the mechanics, or basically like the functions of business versus what most people are doing, which is pie in the sky for a lot of those kind of tech companies.
One of the things that I also see on LinkedIn a lot is like 7x or like 18x founder. And you're like, that's cool and all, but can we get like 18x profitable founder? Because those are two very different things.
For sure, bro. For sure, man. If you think about like all the businesses I had as a kid, and they all ran into the floor, right? All those startups and shit that raise money, and that ecosystem, bro, it's so toxic because people raise money, and let's say they raise a mill, okay, which is nothing. It's nothing, right? From ventures, from angels, it's probably very little. But that money is actually just salaries. So that just pays for salaries for, let's say, 18 months. And then in 18 months' time, they still have a shitty product that no one's buying. And then they either close the doors and they were founded for 2 years, or they raise a bunch more money and end up with nothing. And then at the end of their dilution, before they hand it off to basically a liquidator, they're left with 7%. And then it's 7% of like 40K that's distributed. They end up with like $7. So it's just an interesting paradigm. And I've seen people firsthand, especially when I lived in Singapore, people would take that money and party with the money. They would have fundraising parties and stuff. I couldn't think of anything in my entire life apart from just working on the business. So it's funny coming from that, from our background, what we're doing, because we know like the value of work, the unit of work effectively, and like bringing in a new contractor, how stressful it is, how difficult it is, the challenges of ramping people up, which makes you, man, an amazing business owner. Like, to think about what you've done already makes you an incredible business owner, man. And as time goes on, you systematize your process, you dial it in, you bring in more people. God knows where you could end up in a few years.
It's insane to me. Like, the little things make the biggest difference. So, in addition to the CSGO thing, just a little bit after that, I started a monster. Essentially, it was essentially just like a monster cartel at my school because they banned energy drinks. So, what I would do is I would buy the giant 18 packs from Costco, bring it in, whatever. And I learned distribution and essentially where things go, how to systematize. And then I used one of my friends and I would give him commission on it. So that was like my first employee, if you will.
Love it.
And it's and
Love it.
and so what you do is you have a little bit here that I've learned and brought over here. And I'm sure from every single startup or every single place that you've worked, you have at least one little thing that you learned and you brought into this company and went, we're not gonna fucking do that. We're not.
100%. Dude, I'll tell you something funny. You'll love this. And you can hear me clearly like this, right? Because I'm holding the mic.
Yeah.
So my first businesses were running parties. So I used to run mystery tour parties. So I would hire a bus, bring people, sell tickets for the bus, and then bring people on a bus. They'd all be drinking and partying, and then bring them to like a random place, like a random like club or party, whatnot. And I was basically arbitraging it. I was renting the bus, going to the club, getting the tickets, and having a margin in between. I then went on to run bigger parties and bigger scale parties. And then as a result of doing that, I did the same thing. Sold tickets, got people to the venue, had distribution, had marketing, had a funnel, same thing over and over again. And then I moved from there to selling rave clothes to rave kids. And I did the exact same thing. I just got the clothes from Italy. They were all like urban clothing, like street clothing, let's say. Sold it at an arbitrage to rich kids in London, and people loved it. And then the same process just kept building over and over again, to the point that you build a company and you have employees, and then you have revenue, gross profit, net profit. So it was only a mentor said to me, he was like, "You are just good at arbitrage at the end of the day." And I was like, "I guess I am," because I just sell shit and then just figure out how to actually build it, because everybody else is spending like fucking 4 years trying to build an energy drink and then sell it on Amazon FBA that no one fucking buys. Whereas if you just have an idea, sell it immediately and then build it afterwards, you'll figure it out. And also, this the pressure you have to deliver will mean you'll act actually better than just like, any bullshit, basically. Because if you're ruminating on your idea and you're in San Francisco trying to get funding and you're like writing all this bullshit on the wall, you're going to come up with a pretty lazy idea. Whereas if you sold something and it was, let's say, a productivity tool, you're going to fucking build that tool pretty quickly and release it pretty quickly, which is what I do, man. Every single thing that I do to this day, we sell it and we build it. Even in our done for you offer within our company. So we partner with our clients and grow their businesses. I will often get asked, can I build a let's say like a learning platform for someone in like the most abstract niche, like no idea what that niche is, I'll just say yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's just an accumulation of resources. I need to put the right people in the right seat. I need to figure out some stuff. I'll get some info from the client. He'll tell me about, what we're doing from an SME perspective. I'll just sell the fucking thing, build it. And done is always better than perfect. And everybody else is waiting to have things done. I'm waiting to get paid, and then we'll make it perfect as time goes on. It's such a distinction, man. It's a small distinction.
Hey guys, hate to get into the podcast. I just wanted to say I have a newsletter. And this newsletter gets you free marketing information every single week with 3 marketing tips, 2 things that are going on in the marketing industry, and one of my personal case studies. So, with that being said, if you at all want to learn about marketing, go ahead. There's going to be a link in my description to subscribe and enjoy the free information. With that, back to the podcast. It's also really nice because you can learn what they want with the product. So you can sell it, you can ask for feedback so it's improved for the next person, and then you can sell the better product. And it's just this cycle of constant improvement again.
We're doing exactly that in Incubator right now. Is that I'll often just ask people, I'll be like, what shit? Or like, what do you want to see different? And like, obviously people aren't saying like it's shit, but they're just like, oh yeah, like I'd like this done. And then I would just get on my laptop and I'd just make it. Because it's not like, it's not like we're solving fucking we're not like curing a disease here, right? Like for the most part, the changes we're making are always going to be minute, right? So at the same point of making those minute changes, you can do them on the fly. It's providing you have, you've done your years, you've been a designer and a web developer for so many years that you can do things for the most part, and then you're filling in the knowledge, right? I think that's what's funny about this stuff, dude. This happens in product all the time. So, I mentioned to you, I came from a product background. We had a thing called CSAT, which is customer satisfaction score. So basically, once a quarter, you like run a survey to a bunch of people on your email list, maybe to like 500 of the email list. You could have like 1,000,000 people on the email list, sorry. And then you'll just ask them like 1 to 5, like how's the usability, how's the features, what would you want to see differently, and then maybe you might get 100 responses, and you actually want to only have 100, and that 100 is a proxy basically for the entire audience, and you just look at them, and then that roadmap, so that feedback, is the entire build for the next year. I shit you not. I've literally, as a product manager in the past, I've looked at all the problems people have said, and I've spent the next year just building what they've asked. Because what else do people want? If people are telling you want something and you don't fucking do it, then you're just not listening to them, right? And I think this is just funny when we get into the kind of product sphere, which is what I love. Even with a service business, it's a bit hard in service business to always nail what someone asks for feedback. Someone could ask for something absolutely wild, and it's just not feasible. But for the most part, if it's feasible, you just give it to them.
Yeah, my newsletter that's coming out on Monday, the title of it is "Your Client is Your Boss. Act Like It." Because they are. Like, I mean, especially in service-based businesses, you feed them, right? You give them what they want.
Cool point, man.
So, what does your funnel look like? Talk to me about it.
That's a good question. So it's all about awareness, right? Top of funnel, it's all about awareness. It's a podcast. For me, I actually started on LinkedIn because the podcast was so small. Whereas for LinkedIn, I had an audience. So I had an audience of a couple of thousand people. So I could always channel people from my LinkedIn area, which for me is authority and mainly writing from that key person of influence perspective. So I write on LinkedIn. It's not really flashy. It's much more specific and technical. And it's basically sharing a lot of the insights to do with podcasting, different areas like that. Then from either the podcast or from LinkedIn, we're usually bringing them into, from the podcast, it will go into LinkedIn. And then from there, there's a combination of just YouTube and then also Instagram. Instagram, still warming up. I don't think it's that very valuable for selling like B2B stuff, but it's good for reach effectively. And then that reach can become referrals and so on. And then from there, for the most part, it's either into the newsletter, where I just deepen the trust with people for the most part. Just give them more value, go deeper with there. And then there's generally a CTA in there for either whatever I'm feeling at the time, which could be book a call. It could be, what else could be there? It could be a program like podcast accelerators or low ticket offer. It could be one of those. So that's on the organic side. But at the same time, people can just go straight in and book a call, right? So like whether you see the podcast or whether you see posts on LinkedIn, you don't need to like de-platform and re-platform people's half the time. You can just fucking book a call, right? So I think there's always that idea too, which is like simplicity. Now you can run your niche into the fucking ground, I will say. So I haven't yet, definitely not. But there will come a point whereby everybody in the niche has seen the same post or they know what you're doing or whatnot. And that's when you need to kind of ramp up other stuff. So that's why, having a sales team is important, because you're at a critical mass, right? The niche is small, you're at a critical mass. And then the second side of it then as well, it's the other forms, right? So the other forms then, you have content, you have sales, you have ads. We don't run ads currently, but it's something that I'm definitely having my eye on, how we could potentially look at that. Then there's the organic traffic too, like webinars. What else is there? That's kind of it. That's basically it. And then I try to keep it as streamless as possible, right? So content, nurture, book a call, and then we'll see from there. But I think the biggest thing for us was the fact that have a done for you offer, which means that people have to be willing and able to buy. And that's the problem with done for you. You probably noticed too, right? Is that a lot of people are willing, but not a lot of people are able to buy your offer. So everybody wants to grow a podcast. Everybody wants to have a new website. Everybody wants to have the best sales team. So they're willing to make the change, but they're not able to invest. And if I was to learn one thing from the past couple of years is being able to unbundle my offer to be able to offer more things to people. And so that means looking at my high ticket offer, which can be up to 8.5K a month, and then seeing how do we break that down to maybe less content, 5K a month, less again, maybe 2.5K a month, and then maybe into our coaching program, could be like 2.5K, 3K a month or whatever. And then if there's anything from there. So what I'm trying to do even now, which I'm thinking of doing is, and this is a shit show, is unbundling that further. So how do I take a program and split a program down and bring it even shorter? And I have a few little tricks up my sleeve for how we can do this. Not now, maybe in a few weeks, but still a lot of stuff to figure out. It all comes down to positioning.
I want to make a point on this. So that sounds like a shit show if you do like a la carte in terms of operations. That just sounds like a headache. I know. So in terms of there's just going to be so many different moving parts, because especially the big thing with doing done for you is each client, you have the steps, you have the process built out. Where if it's a la carte, right? You're like here, but skip here, so go here. But skip here, but go here. And so you're moving around. And I know Claire, so she's in Minnesota. I think she's moving. She does social media marketing. And she has an a la carte option. And I know for a fact it bites her in the ass, because it's just so many different moving parts. And so especially if you're scaling, I'm not entirely sure if that's a good idea. Again, like I'm the new kid on the block, so I don't know.
No, I'll give you some context on it, because for us it's an ascension model, right? Because the problem with our done for you is the fact that it's not really fully done for you, because you still need to record. So for us to get someone, so the way our ascension works on done for you is based on volume. So some guys can do 1 episode, 2 episodes, 4 episodes, eight unlimited episodes. Whereas like we're hardly going to get someone who can barely record 1 episode a month to now record 8. Okay. So we have to meet them where we're at, but it's a turnkey solution at the end of the day, because they're the systems we've brought. So it's the delivery mechanism is the same, the volume is different. And then obviously we get paid on volume to some degree. So obviously there's economies of scale and so on and so forth. So they can scale on that side. Whereas like on the coaching side, for the most part, even though like it is very custom, but like that's obviously what gives you like massive scale. But on the done for you side, it just depends on the volume of the guest of the client. It kind of works like that, but it's a little bit different, because there's so much shit involved in our offer. There's writing, there's design, there's obviously editing, So there's that element. And also we don't want to be priced by design, because then you're like a commodity. We're much more priced on like value, or like perceived value, because like what you're also getting is like the strategy behind me, which is like looking at your episodes and being like, that shit, fix this, do that, which like you can only develop by recording 250 episodes, right? Like I can literally look at an episode and just tell you exactly why it's not growing. Whereas most people will just make a hypothesis where I can be like, it's actually that. It's this reason why you're not growing, you know? So people pay for the experience too. And also, just for a bit of context, that's how we've moved really fast without giving like the sauce away, is the fact that we coach people. Most people are just trying to get paid and they're just trying to collect the bag, whereas we're actually coaching people to get better. So these guys are like, fuck, this is super valuable. I'm now not a potato anymore. And now they're able to actually like learn how to actually function as a human. And then the last step is that we're monetizing the shows, right? So, so no one is growing shows properly. No one is helping them with the strategy. And fucking God, no, nobody is actually monetizing shows. And especially on the behalf of people. That's, whatever about your own show. You got lucky with your own show. But the fact that we're running business on the back of everybody's show is like a subsection of a subsection of a subsection of a subsection. And again, back to your point about the, scale. It's not everybody, right? It's the ones that we find great partnerships with. They have good upward trajectory. They get it. They want it. They're committed. They see a 12-month horizon. And obviously, I've been fucking burned sideways with this as well, sometimes in the process. But you obviously have to try to figure out, is it going to work? Sometimes.
Yes. Can I actually get your advice on this real quick? So one of the things that I struggle with in my business is websites. A lot of it is upfront work. So I charge upfront, or I break it up over the course of 2 years, so they can essentially pay it back like a loan type thing. And then I charge hosting. One of the things that I was thinking about is, instead of having like an upfront fee, something like that, instead of being like pay it over the course of 2 years, I could just say, this is the fixed value month to month I have the website. Because then after the 2 years, it also allows me to allocate hours to continuously improve the website. So then again, it's not a commodity, it's perceived value.
I think from obviously an abstract perspective, it's going to be hard to get people to buy into a 2-year commitment of anything. Like if you told me that I had to do something for 2 years, I just wouldn't be able to do it, right? This is nothing to do with web design. It's just in general. So
I have actually had no pushback on that.
But you may not directly, but it's almost like an indirect thing around contracts, right? People might have not have like said anything. It's just something to test, right? Because so this is why pricing is really interesting, is because there's no one way to do it. It's whatever way is fucking working, right? I know guys that do per week. Some guys do $250 a week, $1,000 a month for the coaching programs. Some guys do per month. Some guys do build and release. I know Serge Guattari, he does build and release, which is like 30,000 up front on day one, and then he delivers it in 90 days. And then we do retainers, right? And contracts mean nothing, right? Let's be perfectly honest. Like if someone is not going to pay you, they're just not going to pay you. But the idea of having a contract is good for your balance sheet, and it's also good for, I call it sleep easy at night money, is that cash is coming in. I've had people fucking just completely ghost and not actually fulfill contracts. So it happens. But it's sleep easy at night money. And if you can get people preferably on 6 and 12 months, then you have much more of a predictable business. And especially as you're predicting cash flow, like I've made a bunch of new hires recently. Like as I'm planning out my hires, I'm literally looking at cash flow and thinking, and we have a very, very healthy business anyway, so it's fine. But at the same time, you got to be careful, right? You just got to be careful you don't run yourself into the fucking ground. Because I will do anything, anything before let the business go backwards. Just the way that I'm geared. It's like you move to a new level, and then I would think, we have this thing whereby a lot of our invoices clear on the first of every month. So the first, I wake up every single month, and all my expenses are paid for the month in the business. So then it's just party money. It's just fucking push, see what we can push, see what we can build, see what we can do, see what funnels are there, because it's just party play at that point. And I think that's just a good way to be in. It's just like building a business that's actually profitable versus a showman business, basically.
I'm right on that edge where like I'm profitable enough to support myself, but that's about as far as I am. So it's
So
really
how many
hard as
clients do you
well.
have?
So yeah, okay. So my business is kind of messy. So I have a partner. We're essentially like franchised. So there's two of us. But then we contract each other out because we didn't tax laws in the US are fucked. But since we merged at the beginning of the year, so we didn't want to deal with all fucking paperwork and shit. So we're two separate businesses, but between us we have 107 websites that we host. I'm a lot smaller. I think I only have 30 of those, probably 20 or 30 of those.
How much are those?
But
Those are
then
active though, in terms of like active work.
basically none, like zero active work.
Okay.
Where we're trying to make the money month to month and then what we're playing around with is he does search engine optimization and I do email marketing. So it's two upsells that we can make money on month to month and get that reoccurring revenue. But doing something like I said, switching it so you pay month to month for the website instead of paying up front reduces the pushback on people with seeing the upfront cost. B, allows me to make money long term and enable like an hour or 2 or 3 hours every month to really dial in the website so I can get them better returns.
Yeah, man. It's just about LTV, right? Well, obviously value number one, but then LTV. So there's that element there, which is like, if it you have to get paid for the work that you're doing, right? And I think this is quite interesting is that my consulting fee at the moment is just really fucking high because my bandwidth is so low, but I have so many offers. Okay. So like if someone wants to like learn about podcasting, they can buy into the coaching program and just fucking learn it, or they can have it done for them. So if you were to actually hire me, it was going to be really expensive because of the fact that I'm just doing so much other stuff. It's not like, oh my God, I'm amazing, because there's so much custom work that would be done, and people do that. It's fucking really expensive, and people do that, and they're happy to do that, which is fine. So for you, if you're producing something that's on a monthly basis, you got to make sure that the fucking business is that the website's getting better. But my question on this is like, if it's a website, how many changes would you make before you see improvement, right? Because you can be tinkering the button from fucking blue to green forever without testing the improvement. So I think on the back end having so like a reoccurring service is a reoccurring activity. So if the recurring activity is sending the emails or releasing the podcasts, that's why we have such a beautiful business, because like the only way for you to stop, unless you just want to go do it yourself, is if you give up. And we've had people say that. We've had people give up their podcasts. And I've literally talked them off a ledge saying that is the stupidest thing forever, bro, whatever. So like that's what I think about. Obviously forgetting price, right? But I just mean for the most part, people will stop because they give up. Whereas if you're working for, let's say, if you're, let's say you're designing e-commerce businesses, well, they're always going to send emails, promotions, marketing, whatever. So if you get fucking really good at, actually, don't get really good, hire someone who's really good at writing fucking copywriting emails. Obviously, after you have good enough clients, that dude runs that. You have the website fucking hosting shit, and then it's just going to run async. And that's it, dude. Like that's the beauty of it, right? Obviously, like it's always going to be in reoccurring. Now it's harder to scale and so on and so forth, but there's pros and cons to everything. There is pros and cons to everything. And for someone that has a lot of different offers, I can tell you that like I'm looking at one offer being like, oh my God, it's not going to scale. I'm looking at one offer, I'm like, it's not going to scale. Like that there's so much different things that are challenges at times, but it depends on where you are in your journey as well, right?
I definitely think it's going to be something that I'm going to play with just because it does get that reoccurring revenue. And that's the biggest problem is I constantly feel like I have to sell. Whereas if I had that reoccurring revenue, I had the baseline of clients, I could go, what other things in the business are maybe making it harder for me to sell? What else can I improve other than constantly refining the funnel, right? I can refine other things so I can provide a better quality product, right? Things like that maybe you don't realize are holding you back.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really good thing. Okay.
Yeah, man. Let's continue the conversation on that. Always happy to help, man, on that stuff.
I just want to make sure you're still good.
All good. I actually need to jump to a call in a sec.
Okay. So where do you want to send people?
Nowhere, dude. If people want to find me, they search Darren Lee, and something should pop up, and they should find something at the end of the day. That's all that matters. Hopefully got some fucking lessons from this, man. That's all that matters.
Perfect. And I'm going to link some stuff down below as well for you. So it's
Cool,
not
bro.
totally
Appreciate it.